Hey, folks, I'm here with Garland Nixon, the host of The Critical Hour, a great radio show on Sputnik Radio. He's also on the National Board of Directors of the American Civil Liberties Union. Tell us more about yourself, Garland. You have quite a resume.
Yeah, well, Caleb, I believe it or not, I did 27 years in law enforcement. The actual law enforcement agency that I was in was called the Maryland Natural Resources in Maryland. It's a between a normal police department in Maryland. I'll make this quick. In Maryland, they had like a wildlife police department, and they had, because of the Chesapeake Bay, they had the Marine Police Search and Rescue. In 72, they decided to bring those two together, make it a complete law enforcement agency, and call it the Natural Resources Police, with a focus on natural resources and boating safety and boat search and rescue, but still all of the authority to do all of the regular law enforcement stuff. So I was there 27 years. You name it, I did it. I retired holding the rank of major, so I was the third in command, really, of the entire agency. I was the assistant commander of field operations. And when it comes to law enforcement, I did it all. I was the commander of the investigations division at one time, commander of I had aviation under me. I had communications under me. I've had training under me, the entire training division. So when it comes to law enforcement, I know that field very well. I retired in 2008. I taught criminal justice for 3 to 4 years at Anne Arundel Community College. I've been a salesman. Meanwhile, the entire time all that was going on, I got into journalism. That's my first love. I started doing radio back in like 1999 here and there, and eventually one day. This is weird. One day I got a call from New York, and it was Fox News, and they said, "Hey, we need another liberal to come up and argue with whatever." And I'm thinking, well, I ain't a liberal, but hey, I'm not going to tell them that. And I went
Oh,
up, and I was on Fox News for maybe 10 years, all the time, every show, you name it. The only show I was never on was Hannity, but you name it, the rest of them I've been on, Tucker Carlson, you name it. Laura Ingraham, I know all those people well. I was on their shows regularly. I then did a show in New York for the last 2 years called Chasing News with Bill Spadia. I actually would host the show. It was in New York, New Jersey. It's on My Nine. It was on Fox in New York. It was on Fox in Philadelphia, all over the New York, New Jersey, all the way up to the Poconos. You name it. It was all over creation. And when Bill Spady was off, I would actually host the show. Sometimes. So I have a lot of background in journalism, law enforcement, etc. Now I'm at Sputnik, and again, I'm on the National Board of Directors for the American Civil Liberties Union. I've gotten recognition from them nationally for my work on criminal justice reform and police accountability.
wow. You have quite a resume. And what we were going to talk about today is the fact that you just got back from Venezuela, where you were you observed the election process.
Mhm.
Now, can you tell me how that trip came about, how it was that you got invited to go to Venezuela?
Yeah, so on my show, I'm really very much into foreign policy from the perspective of justice. I got to throw this in for people who have heard of Paul Robeson. I hope you have, particularly if you're on the left or socialist or whatever. Hopefully, you've heard of Paul Robeson. His son, Paul Robeson Jr., who lived in New York, was my mentor for several years. I got lucky enough to meet him. He took me under his wing politically, and I was mentored by him for several years. And you'll forgive me if I'm getting a little dizzy because I'm just getting back here. What's the
Okay.
question again?
How did the invitation for you to go
Oh, okay.
observe the elections happen?
So, in doing my journalism, I have focused a lot on foreign policy from this perspective of justice. And recently, I've been doing a lot on Central and South America. And as you know, that the war on the left in Central and South America, the war on indigenous people and brown people and people who wanted justice by, the U.S. and its corporations. So I've been focusing on that. And the Code Pink people, Medea Benjamin, et cetera, they said, hey, we're going to Venezuela to be election observers. Garland, would you like to go? And I said, sure. And so that's how that came about.
All right. And now tell me, did you observe the actual voting as it took place?
Oh, it was fantastic. So what happened was they brought us in, and we had plenty of security and everything. Every part of the voting process. We came in. So in Venezuela, they have a separate governmental organization, right? Almost like how we have like your judicial and your executive branch and various divisions of power, et cetera, theoretical divisions of power. Um, well, there they have a separate branch by itself, the CNE. I don't speak Spanish, so I don't know what necessarily that stands for, but the CNE. This is an individual. branch of government that handles elections, and they make sure that elections are free and fair, that they're transparent. They are separate. The head of the CNE is not placed in power by the president. There's another method that they have. I think it's the um, I think it may be their parliament, Congress, whatever they're called. But at any rate, okay. So they brought us in. They told us from A to Z, we were trained everything about how their election system worked. We were taken to the factories where the election machines are built. We were walked through how they build them. We were walked through the software. We were walked through how it's installed. We were walked through those things where the software comes from, what platform they run. I mean, you name it. So the machines, we were trained about the machines. Then we were trained completely about the process. We were taken out to, like they have, just like we have estates and counties. I was taken out to a state, and the people there who's in charge of elections explained how they do it. This is what we do when you walk into a booth. They call it the horseshoe, because you like walk up one side. This is what you do at this booth. You vote in the middle. You walk down the other side, so it's shaped like a horseshoe. Everything is done so you are completely and absolutely trained how this thing works. And on the day of voting, they take you out and they show you the voting booth when it opens. They show you, okay, it's opening. This is what happens. Then you come back and get some breakfast. Then they take you out to different parts of the country. They take different people. They took me about an hour or two out to this area called Aragua, and a couple of different towns there, and a couple of different, I don't know what you would call them. Like a neighborhood that was built by Chavez, and the homes were given away free to all the people and all that kind of stuff. There'd be a big neighborhood, and they'd have a school, and they'd have things like that. And in that school, there's where you vote, right? So they took you to voting centers in a place like that. But then they took you to voting centers that's just in the center of town that's not in one of those places, and et cetera, right? You can talk to the people. You can ask them any question you want. You can talk to the people working there. You can talk to the people on the streets, completely transparent. And you're trained how the system works. And at the end of the day, they show you how they close the booth. So you are fully trained on everything. You are allowed to observe it independently. And when you leave there, you have a full understanding. You're told how it works. You watch how it works, and then you watch it close down. It was absolutely incredibly transparent.
Yeah, I visited Venezuela in 2015 during their parliamentary elections that they had, the National Assembly elections in 2015. And I remember visiting the CNE office and such. Well, what's particularly interesting about it is apparently, so now these allegations, they've been alleging that Venezuela's elections are rigged, that Chavez and Maduro are all dictators. But now these allegations have a particularly a new flavor to them, because now Trump is using those allegations to claim that the election was rigged. Right? Have you heard this? Now it's Venezuelan voting machines and conspiracy with China and conspiracy with some company in Canada all rigged the process so that Trump would lose. Did you hear that about how Venezuela has somehow fit into the conspiracy theory of Trump?
Yes, and in an odd way, maybe I'm wrong, but as soon as I heard Trump make these absurd allegations, right? I mean, you go there and it's a very poor country. It's being crushed under U.S. sanctions. The idea that they could do anything to fight back or influence our elections is laughable. But as soon as I heard it, to be honest, Caleb, the first thing I thought was Russiagate. The first thing I thought was the liberals, whatever you want to call them in this country, right? 4 years of that crap, of those lies, of completely, discounting our election system, they created a dynamic where it's easy to do that. So the first thing I thought is, look, the liberals for the last few years, the radical center, whatever you want to call them, for the last 4 years, have been doing exactly what Trump, completely discounting our election system, discrediting our election system, absurdities that an independent corporation in Russia that is in no way connected to the government, who's operating for profit. According to the Mueller report, they were charging money for advertisements. That they had some Facebook ads that they were being paid for by U.S. companies, that totally disrupted our election. They created a dynamic where now when Trump says this craziness about whoever, the Martians, the Chileans, the, Nicaraguans, the Venezuelans, we know it's going to be a left-leaning country that he hates, a socialist of some type. They created an environment where he could do that, and he could make that argument, and they look like fools in pushing back on it. That was my immediate response.
Now, let me ask you, we've been told here in the United States that everyone in Venezuela is starving to death, and this is because socialism doesn't work as a system and capitalism is the best way. Did you observe Venezuelans who are living in absolute misery because of their government, or what did you see?
Now, there's two things going on here. Yes, they are living in misery. They are really living in misery, right? I mean, it's tough. You can't get a lot of places. You go into neighborhoods, they can't get toilet paper. They can't get simplest things in life. They're very difficult to getting food, no coffee, no milk, you name it. The most basic staples that they live off of, a lot of them have trouble getting it. But it has nothing to do with their government. This is about U.S. sanctions. This is the equivalent of you and I we're going to do a 100-yard race. I tie your legs together, tie your arms together, and then take off and say, look at Caleb, that guy, boy, he's sure slow. I mean, he can't even run. I just tied your arms and legs together. That's exactly what we're doing. In fact, you look at some of the tweets. You look at some of these statements. Marco Rubio said Venezuela is about to enter into a period of misery that no country in this hemisphere has ever had to deal with, right? They say Mike Pompeo tweets, no food, no medicine, now no power, no Maduro. So they admit on Twitter, out of their own mouths, that they're doing everything to make a nation that's mostly brown and mixed people. They're indigenous people mixed with black former slaves, mixed with Spaniards, etc. That's by far the majority. They say out of their own mouths, we're going to make their lives miserable. And then they say, oh, by the way, their government's making their lives miserable. That's like me walking up behind Caleb, hitting him in the head with a baseball bat and saying, man, that Caleb, he just doesn't take care of himself. Look at it. He's laying there, his head's bleeding, as though he did something. I snuck up and hit him in the back of the head. That's what I saw there with my own eyes.
Yeah, but despite all of that, there have been some big economic benefits to socialism. I mean, in terms of public housing, I know they've constructed a lot of housing there. I mean, I went through a neighborhood where every single house had been built with a government loan, from the socialist government, and there have been some real improvements in spite of everything.
Sure, love to talk about that. One of the great things was I was allowed to get out and talk to the people in the streets. I talked to the people that were my interpreters. I talked to various people. Now, people, the argument, oh, the government just let you hear what they had to say. The guy that was interpreting from me was from Denver. He was there with us as one of the observers, and he's like interpreting for me. So he didn't work for the government.
Right.
So I'm talking to people. So here's some of the things that I found out. And that was the government there built about 2.5 million homes. Now, what they do is they built these big sky rises. They weren't luxurious and they weren't dumps. They were just like middle class sky rises like you'd see here anywhere, right? I went in one area, I saw about 50 of these buildings. And I was told that, so I said, well, what's the deal on that? Wow, look at all those sky rises. They said, well, that was it. And then you saw a little military base beside it. I said, what's that? They said, well, that whole thing was a military base. And then Chavez says, we have people that don't need housing, and we got this gigantic military base. Let's build all these buildings on the military base, and we'll use this little part over here just for the military base. I said, well, how do you decide who gets the houses by their government? And they said, well, you fill out paperwork, you submit it to the government, and it goes to those who are most in need. And they said women and children. If there's a woman that has children and no husband, no whatever, that's who gets first dibs. And then after that, just poor people that don't have anything. So they're giving away these houses. I asked the people on the street, I'm like, what about electricity, things like that? They said, oh, no, that's considered a human right here. So if you have some money or you're wealthier, you have to pay, even the wealthy pay a small amount. If you don't, it's considered a human right. And even if you're wealthy, if you don't pay it, they don't cut you off because it's considered a human right there. So they build houses. They provide food. Now, what I found out, because of the sanctions, they said how many kilograms a week you get. I don't know. They give you a box with a bunch of food in it every week for your family, right? So you got a house. You're poor people. You got a house, you got food, you've got, you can survive. But they said because of the sanctions, they used to give whatever amount it is weekly. Now they can only do it monthly because the sanctions have made it, so hard for them to do that. So when you look there, I went to this housing, I don't know what you call it, neighborhood, right, where that was built by the government. And might I add, with all they're going through, we're riding by where they're building where these a bunch of high rises were that they had given away to poor people. There were the cranes. They're still building them. With all they're going through, they're still building more houses. I don't know how they do it with the, with the pain, economic pain that's being put on them by sanctions. So that's what you saw. And you went into these areas and you talked to these people. And what I found amazing was the resilience of these people. They knew that they were being beaten down. They knew what was going on. And I was in this one like section, and they had a very and again, these are free houses for the poor, and it was like a little neighborhood. They had a nice, clean school. They had buildings, they had the things that they needed, a nice kindergarten. You go in there and there's pictures for the kids and all this stuff, a nice little area. And I'm outside talking to them, and these are women. And they're shaking their fists. They're saying, we are the sons and daughters of Chavez. We are Chavistas. We will fight for our democracy. And the resilience of these people under the crushing sanctions of the United States. I walked there feeling, greatly pained, right? These people were just angry and determined. It's like the harder you push on them, their fist comes out. We will defend our democracy. We will not go down. I was highly motivated by that.
Sure. That's one thing that struck me when I was in Venezuela was just, how there is a core of people that are very, very, very dedicated to the socialist project and very, very loyal to the revolution. Were you able to visit any collectivos and communes, any of those areas?
Well, I think the one that I was talking about, I think that might have been one, because when you came in, as you know, there's a lot of murals. They're big on their art and murals, beautiful colored murals that the people paint, that local artists paint. You know what I mean? There's everywhere, beautiful murals. A lot of them, you don't even know who painted them. I'm like, who painted that? They're like, we don't know. Just some people came up and started painting, and there it was, right? And the one that I went in, it was a neighborhood, and it said something socialista, blah, blah, blah. And I think that might have been one of them. Okay. It was, I think, because it was a community that was built by the government. I don't know if the communes are built by the government, but it was built by the government, and it had all the stuff that the people needed. And they seemed to be very happy with their situation, keeping in mind that, 1989, 1990, they were living okay, and the government came and overthrew the U.S. overthrew their government, stuck some schmuck in, and the, poverty just went through the roof. And so they suffered. Chavez came in, instituted the socialist policies, and their lives turned around. And they went from living in poverty and mud huts and not having food to living well, to having a good meal, to having a roof over their head with what, a lot of them, they never had running water. So you figure now they're like, look, we'll fight for this. We'll die for this, because not to have this, they know what comes if Juan Guaido, if the Trumps or the Bidens or the neoliberals come in. They've been through that. They know. And they're like, no, we'd rather fight to the death than we would go back to that, because that is death. I mean, so they've literally told me things like that. And I so that I understood.
Well, what I also think is interesting is, from what I understand, Venezuela's relationship with Iran and with North Korea and with Cuba has really expanded as a result of these sanctions. Did you see a lot of Iranian influence, a lot of Cuban influence? I mean, did you see these expanding connections with other countries that the USA has waged similar economic warfare against?
Yeah, in fact, when we had small buses and you would travel with different groups, and when I went out to the polls closing, I went out with the Iranian delegation, and the guy who was with me with the Iranian delegation was the speaker of the Iranian parliament.
Wow.
These were high-level diplomatic delegations here. I felt like a schmuck. I mean, these are powerful people from Africa, Cuba, you name it. China, Russia, Romania, you name it. The Iranians were just. I tell you what strikes me. They're really brilliant intellectual people. They're very kind, gentle people. I just love the Iranians. They reminds me a lot, interesting, of the Palestinians, cultural wise. You know what I mean? We hear all this, oh, they're terrorists. And when you meet the people, they're the most beautiful people you've ever met in your life. So I got to travel with the Iranians. I actually saw, I can send you a picture, Anya Parampil, Max Blumenthal's wife, took a great picture. She sent it to me, and it is a mural, a beautiful mural of it's a half Venezuelan flag and half Iranian flag, and it has like the two, how you put two hands that clasp together like that. The hands were clasped together to demonstrate the unity between the people. So you saw a lot of that, the Iranian people and the because I believe what we see now. Oh, might I add? I'm in the room, Evo Morales, Rafael Correa, presidents, the guy from, I forgot. I'm just saying the top socialist leaders, the top revolutionary leaders in the in Latin America. I'm sitting right there and I'm looking at them. I'm up 2 feet away. The thing that I find amazing is that here you would never get 2 feet away from George Bush or whatever, right? But when you realize these people came up from unions, they're leaders of the people, and they're there to support the Venezuelan people, right? They're there to support their democracy, and they're there. And but Evo Morales, for God's sake, you know what I mean? I'm there, and people, my friends are getting pictures with him, things of that nature, and I was just amazed. It was just an incredible experience, one of the most wonderful things I've ever experienced in my life. And yes, the Iranians and I'll put it like this: it appears to me that organically an anti-imperialist bloc is forming, and it's being formed by the United States. We are forming it as a nation by pushing the people down. I once heard Alan Watts say that nothing makes a tree grow like pruning it. And by this pushing down that we're doing on these people, in the same way that Chavez came out of neoliberal oppression and the people were crushed and oppressed, and Chavez came in, gave them another option. The U.S. and our neoliberalism did that. We're creating an anti-imperialist bloc, and it's just a beautiful thing to see.
Well, I guess I'll ask, what was their view of our recent election results? Because I know some people around the world feel that Trump was less interventionist, but other folks feel like, especially with Venezuela and Iran, he was more excited about regime change. So, how did the Venezuelans feel about Biden's victory at the polls?
I'll put it like this. It appears to me, and this is my interpretation of it, so I can't speak for them. It appears to me that what they see it as, look, we've got a new president come in. Our experience with the United States, Barack Obama, etc., is horrific. But there's an option here. We hope for the best, but we don't expect the best. And one of the reasons is, this is a story I got to tell you. I got to tell you this, and this will help you to understand how they see things. And we're talking about history thing. Now, here's the other thing that is amazing about the Chavista movement, and this is part of it. Your average person on the street, you walk around here in America, you talk to the average person on the street about America history, blah, they know nothing. They don't know history the last week. These people know their history, right? I mean, the average person, they deeply know their history. Okay, so I'm driving around, we're riding around, and I see these pictures of Barack Obama with devil horns. I'm like, whoa. And these things about Obama, blah, 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 fascista, this, and I'm like, whoa. And I keep seeing and there was something, no Obama, something or other, and I couldn't understand Spanish, but you knew it wasn't positive. You know what I mean? It's like, I don't know what that means, but it ain't, I love Obama. Because there's a picture of him next, and he's red, and he's got devil horns. I'm thinking that's probably not praise. Okay. And so I'm like asking the people, through my interpreter, what's up with Obama? Why does everybody hate Obama? And they said, we've been through a lot in this country, but 2016 was the worst year. I'm like, really? They said, yes. Barack Obama said that our country, that Venezuela is how'd they put it, a national security threat to the United States.
Right.
As a result, and one of the issues they had was they bought a lot of their stuff overseas. They imported a lot of stuff. And they said, look, if you ever heard, they talk about Mexico and they say no corn, no country. The people live off, cornmeal every month. They have all these things. They said, well, we're the same way, that we eat these things called arepas. And it's like a little corn biscuit, or you can and they're really delicious. And they eat them every meal. It's a staple. Oh, they're absolutely fantastic. Though it's not healthy, I like the fried ones best. But, hey, I was there and I ate. But at any rate, but they eat it with every meal. It's a staple. It's like rice in China. It's a staple of what they eat their food with, right? Okay. And when people are really, really, really poor and they don't have much, then they can eat arepas for a couple days, right? But because of Chavez, you didn't have that because they're giving you food each month. You had all kinds. You had meats and dried meat and dried fish and things like that. Okay. Powdered milk, I think they said they gave them because the milk would spoil. Okay. So Obama says this. They imported all of their cornmeal. The companies that imported stopped doing business with them. Wow. You have a country where the people, it would be like saying in China tomorrow, no more rice.
Mm.
What they said was, they said, look, you walked around, your friends, your family members, you literally saw people getting skinnier. You
Wow.
talk to family members. What's happening? We haven't had much of anything to eat in 3 days. How about your family? 2 days. How about you? It's been almost a week for us.
Wow.
You walked around. Barack Obama starved. He created famine in an entire country that's mostly poor brown people. What
Wow.
a horrific thing. And they haven't forgotten. So you got these people here running around. Barack Obama's my president. Oh, things were wonderful. And they don't know. That's when I realized something. There's a reason they don't want us to go to Venezuela. There's a reason they're like, people can't go to Venezuela. Oh, no, we don't want you going into Venezuela. It's too dangerous. It's bad as this. Because if you go there and you find out the truth, you will be aghast at the crimes against humanity that have been committed by these so-called liberals in the United States and the so-called progressives, whatever the hell they are, by these creeps, by these monsters. You will be aghast. And so, did you know that about Obama?
I knew he declared the national security threat. I didn't know that particular aspect of it. I didn't know it prevented the importation of key food products.
Yes.
That's very extreme. Yes.
For
And
all that they've been through in that country, can you imagine people? And when I ask about Obama, you could see the look on their face. And it was like, they didn't just say, oh, 2016 was a bad year. They were like, it was the worst. It was unbelievable. It was unbearable. They said, like, everybody that you know, everybody that you talk to, every cousin, brother, sister, friend, neighborhood was hungry all the time, every day. Can you
wow.
imagine in New York City? There's a hunger problems right now thanks to neoliberalism. But can you imagine if you walk down the street from Bronx to Queen to Yonkers and every human being that you talk to is starving to death every day, hungry, getting skinnier, losing weight, pants falling off, have to poke holes in their belt. Literally, they said, oh, everybody. That was one of the things we did. We took ice picks and poked holes in our belts so that because our belts would run. And I'm like, boy, that's
Yeah, and I
horrific.
mean, and if this was being perpetrated by another government, the United States would condemn it as a crime against humanity. I mean, if that kind of mass induced hunger, I mean, was being it was being intentionally created for political reasons, I mean, we would condemn that. That's just not acceptable under the UN Charter, under the International Declaration of Human Rights. You can't do this kind of thing. I mean, this is a crime.
Yeah, and I'm gonna bring up some. I do a radio show in Washington D.C. on WPFW, and I have got to bring up. I really have to bring up. I had some quotes yesterday. The thing about it is, and they talked about this. Well, this is one of the things that they discussed because they were very familiar with all of these. What was going on? Here's a couple of statements. Right. This is Mike Pompeo, a tweet on the 7th of March 2019. No food, no medicine, now no power. That was when the U.S. Did a terrorist act against them, against their hydroelectric dam, and shut out electricity in 50 to 80% of the country. No
Wow.
food, no medicine, now no power, next no Maduro. Here's another one, Marco Rubio. Over the next few weeks after that happened, Venezuela is going to enter a period of suffering no nation in our hemisphere has ever confronted in modern history. And I thought about that, and I'm like, that is, and this is not an exaggeration, that is Nazi level evil. It's
Yeah.
not a lot of times in America, everything's Nazi. There's Ben Carson. Giving people health care is worse than slavery. We hear that madness. Everything is the Holocaust or slavery. Okay. And I always say the only things that you can compare with the Holocaust and slavery are the Holocaust and slavery, for God's sake. But at any rate, okay. But to me, when I go there to see a nation of mostly poor brown people and to see these people celebratory. Can you imagine? I'm starving children. Babies are dying. Children are starving to death. Adults, parents, the women, they said, yeah, the women were breastfeeding, but they had no milk because they were starving to death, right? That you put people and you say, Venezuela is going to enter a period of suffering no nation in our hemisphere has ever confronted in modern history. When you say that, it should be followed by, and we're going to do something to alleviate it, and we're going to mitigate it, and we're going to stop it. This was a celebration. Hooray! We are going to make
Wow.
the poor people suffer like no human being has ever suffered. And I'm just like, that's Nazi level evil. It
Yeah.
really is Nazi level evil.
Yeah. Wow. Well, thank you for doing the good work and going there and showing us what's really going on, and more importantly, why it's really going on. And thank you for your reporting on this election. I'm sure my audience will love to check you out. I go on your show with Dr. Wilmer Leon all the time. You also have a great show locally in DC on Pacifica Radio.
Yes,
You
on
mentioned.
Pacifica.
Yeah, people should check out Garland Nixon's work. Great stuff. So thank you very much.
Well, I got to throw one other thing in. Last thing, only take a second.
Yeah,
When I came back, you know what I noticed?
Hmm.
I am like shadow banned to hell on Twitter.
Wow.
When I came back, I mean, I would tweet something, and I got a bunch of followers. I'd have 100, 200, 350 likes, tweets, etc. Right?
Mm-hmm.
Came back 3, 4. I had people contacting me saying, you know what? I would try to retweet it, and it would say something went wrong. Never had that before. I would try to retweet you, and it would say I can only retweet with a caption or whatever they call with a quote. It won't let it. And I'm looking Facebook and Twitter, the numbers. I mean, I look before, and it's like I would make a Facebook post, 119, 140. Now I look 6, 7, 8, 9 people.
Wow.
Yeah, I've been, and in fact, when I bring up my Twitter account and it says notifications, before it may say notifications, 50 things, right? Of people who have replied to me or whatever, or tweeted, right? Now it'll come up and the number will be there for just a second and it disappears. And someone else told me they saw one of my tweets. When they opened it up, it said 119 likes, and instantly it flashed to 3. So that, I mean, I guess that could be expected. That's part of the neoliberal machine, but that's amazing.
That's all the more reason why everyone watching this should now go follow your page and make a point of doing it, because you're not going to show up in their news feeds. So what is your Twitter handle so people can go follow you for updates?
It's an easy one, at Garland Nixon. It's my name.
All right,
that's it. Follow me, and I'm on Facebook, and but mostly Facebook and Twitter is how I do my stuff.
All right. Well, thank you for your work. Thank you for this great eyewitness account of life in Venezuela. I'll be posting this on YouTube in a couple minutes. And thank you very much. And, I look forward to hearing more from you and more great interactions on Critical Hour and other shows. So good times.
Thanks a lot. Same here. I'm available if you want me to come on. Let me know, and I'd love to talk to you soon.
All right. Best wishes. Thank you.
Thank you.